Time to check in with Carmi Levy. He's our CTV tech analyst. We chat every Thursday afternoon. And Carmi, there was a story. Typically, we don't talk about government stuff that Canada, with respect to announcements made in the tech sector. And I don't know if this would necessarily qualify, but I think it kind of crosses the line here. We heard François-Philippe Champagne talk about the fact that, finally you're going to have a federal agency to deal with scams, frauds, that kind of stuff. And obviously, a lot of that does happen online. So my first question to you is, based on what you did hear from the minister, are you encouraged? Because obviously, it's great to hear it, but what about enforcement? How would it work?
Yeah, so they're calling this the Financial Crimes Agency, and it's all part of their national anti-fraud strategy. And any time any level of government says, hey, the digital environment is a dangerous place, we're going to, invest in something to make it more safer for Canadians, I think that's a good thing. It raises awareness. It encourages others to invest in it. It creates standards that keep us all safer. So this is a good thing, and I certainly don't want to discourage, the government from that. However, this is, it's a good thing, but, they're going to have new policies and procedures. They're going to make it harder. They're going to have new rules for banks, so that you and I have more control over who can gain access to our accounts and when the terms, for example, account limits, deposit limits, withdrawal limits are changed. They're going to collect more data on financial fraud so they can kind of get on top of it, get ahead of it. These are all good things. But what I'm not seeing here is, well, how much money are they investing in this? So we don't know. Right now, it's a policy change, but they're not devoting resources to it, and they're not putting it on a timeline. And they're also not talking about enforcement. In other words, what kind of tools are you going to give to law enforcement? What kind of tools are you going to give to Canada's financial agencies that track this kind of activity so to stay on top of it? And, of course, also, how are fraudsters going to be punished? Are you changing the laws to make these crimes even more sort of difficult to weasel out from, make the punishments bigger, make more of a deterrent? So none of that at this point. So we're kind of hoping that there's a part two. But at least as far as part one goes, well, they finally recognize that Canadians are losing billions of dollars to digital fraud, and they're finally doing something about it. But it's only a little something. It's not everything we'd hoped for.
Yeah, it sounds like the part two is going to be a lot more important than the part one. So we'll have to wait and see.
Right on.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it's just on paper.
Yeah. So then I see names, and I go, Steve Wozniak, right? That's a guy from Apple Computer, back with Steve Jobs back in the day. He's tied into this, and all of a sudden, Prince Harry's name in the note that you sent me, Carmi, and 800 others who say they want to ban and I want to understand this correctly, not a ban on AI as specifically, but on what they call AI super intelligence. What does this mean?
So basically, it's sort of what AI will be when it finally is mature. So right now, what we use is artificial or generative AI, artificial intelligence. And so what that is, they're the chatbots like ChatGPT. And, we can still tell they're not really quite there. They're not really perfect. They're still, they can write things, for example. They can do analyses, but they're still not as good as humans in most situations. Artificial general intelligence, which is known as AGI, well, that's the point where AI is as good as a human. It can reason like a human. It can perform tasks like a human. We're not there yet. And there are some researchers who say we'll get there in a few years. Super intelligence is like AGI on steroids. That's when AI becomes even smarter than a human, and we're clearly not there yet. And so what these people are saying, so Steve Wozniak, he invented the Apple computer, Prince Harry, of course, Richard Branson, there are 800 of some of the leading lights in the world. Geoffrey Hinton, the Canadian computer scientist who won the Nobel for his work on AI last year, they're part of something called the Future of Life Institute, and they're signing this letter basically saying we should stop development of super intelligence until we figured out how to do it safely, how to do it controllably, how to ensure that the public has bought into it. And, and this is very similar to other sort of broad-based letters that we've seen from famous people over the last couple of years since ChatGPT first came out and sort of brought it to the public's attention. They're all saying, this is, we're creating a rocket here. It's incredibly powerful, but if we don't really take care of it and build safety standards into it, we're going to have a huge problem. So this is just the latest one of that. The unfortunate thing, and I'm glad that they're doing it, the unfortunate thing is all the other letters have basically been ignored. The technology is still being developed. Companies like OpenAI and Google and Amazon are still pouring billions of dollars into it because there's even more billions to be made from it. Profit matters more than safety, and yet another letter is probably not going to change that at all. Gets everyone's attention, gets them talking, and then in a few days or weeks, we'll all just go back to what we were doing before.
And at the end, Carmi, this does come, it's the companies themselves developing this that have to take some of that responsibility, right? The government's not going to step in and do this.
Exactly, but that's the thing. We have to hope that the companies will choose to be morally and ethically on the right side of the curve. So if you're a company like OpenAI, which is responsible for ChatGPT, or if you're Google, which is developing Gemini, or Microsoft, which is developing Copilot, we have to kind of hope that they're going to do the right thing. But the problem here is doing the right thing is really expensive. They have to take their engineers, and instead of having them develop these tools, they have to spend a lot more money on ensuring those tools are safe. And when you're fighting each other, OpenAI is battling Google, which is battling Microsoft, which is battling Amazon. Nobody wants to pull their foot off of the gas pedal and spend more money on safety. Safety slows you down. Coming off the brakes, that speeds you up. And so that's kind of the existential problem that the industry faces right now. And governments could impose tighter restrictions. They could bring in new laws that, force companies to behave in a certain way. But we've seen so far that usually takes a long time. Canada doesn't have any law in the pipeline right now. We're hoping to have one by the end of the year. Other jurisdictions, the European Union has something called the AI Act. But generally speaking, technology is moving faster. Governments are moving slower.
Let me move on before I run out of time, because this is quite a fascinating story. We were talking about this yesterday. My producer, Alice, saw this and said, okay, we need some more info. So it turns out that Alan Hamel, people may recognize the name, celebrity, Canadian, who was married to Suzanne Somers forever. And she died, I think, a couple of years ago now. Actually last year in 2024, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, her husband has apparently decided to create an AI twin of Suzanne Somers. I don't even know how we'd refer to this other than that. So have you seen this, Carmi?
Yeah, so apparently it has been demonstrated at a conference. Alan Hamel got up on the stage and demonstrated it, and they trained this. He calls it the Suzanne AI twin.
Yeah.
He trained it on the 27 books that Suzanne Somers had written. She wrote a lot about her. She battled breast cancer for 23 years, and she wrote extensively about it. And she also did a lot of interviews on it. And so they've essentially fed all that information into an AI bot, which is customized for her, to her, to basically be her. Mm-hmm. And then on stage, apparently, everyone asked questions of her, and and the AI bot answered as Suzanne Somers would. And it feels creepy. It always does when you sort of bring a dead celebrity back to life. And this certainly does as well. But I think it all hinges on one thing. Did she give permission? And according to Alan Hamel, he and his wife had for years been talking about it. They had met with sort of the noted thinker Ray Kurzweil years ago. And they talked about how this would one day be a thing, that AI would be good enough, the technology would be there. And apparently, according to Alan Hamel, now it is. Suzanne Somers gave her permission, and he no plans to sort of make this available to live people like you and me. But other celebrities, for example, James Earl Jones, licensed his voice before he passed away so that Darth Vader could live on in artificial intelligence. So the line is, did they give permission before? If they did, it's kind of morally and ethically okay, even if it feels creepy. But if they didn't give permission, or if it's just strangers who are grabbing content off of YouTube and creating videos that they have no right to create, I think that crosses a moral, ethical, and legal line.
I would ask, this is, in a sense, kind of like going to one of those concerts that's a hologram, right? Like an Elvis, for example, and you're watching him perform, but it's not really Elvis.
Exactly. And you know that it's not Elvis, that you know that the technology was trained on performances of Elvis. It certainly isn't him. But if it was Elvis's estate that gave the permission, then it's I guess sort of acceptable. Even though Elvis died in 1976, long before this technology was a thing, would he have approved of it? Would have been okay with him? Whereas at least with Suzanne Somers, she lived until, just a couple of years ago. So presumably she would have seen this technology coming. Yeah. She obviously talked about it a lot during her life. And so I think it's reasonable if she wanted to live on in AI, eternity afterward, and she asked her husband to make it happen.
Why not?
I still find it a little bit weird, but you know what? There are a lot of people who suffer from breast cancer who might benefit from having this kind of insight, being able to interact with a bot that is, trained on that data. Maybe not necessarily such a bad thing for some people who could benefit from it.
All right. We haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure at some point we'll probably see something. There'll be something released. Carmi, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Aaron.
I'm Luke Wilson. Join me each week for Film Never Lies. Since retiring from the NFL, I've had a lot on my mind, and now I've got my own show. So if you're tired of lazy takes, if you want honest conversations, join us each week. Film Never Lies, available on all TSN platforms and the iHeartRadio app.